This hearing is in order. We've got our witnesses ready, and
gentlemen, if you could stand and repeat after me. I do hereby affirm that I will tell the truth and nothing but the truth to this committee today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
and before I move to the next witness, if I could just indicate that I'm pleased. I don't know if you have a copy of the letter. Yes, you do. So if you could hand that to me.
Would you like to read this?
Oh, well, no, Dr. Bookman, I'd have you read that letter.
There's not just one letter that the committee created. We also have all 6 members who've signed this because it does not deal with a foreign government. It deals with the Veterans Affairs Administration and is also addressed to the President of the United States. We're all 6 members of this committee, and I won't take the time to read it. You're welcome to come up later. Basically demand that Jim Pennison and Airman Burroughs be granted their medical records from this government.
And this point of personal privilege, if I can just say that beyond the obvious benefits to those 2 heroic former members of the United States Air Force, the release of those records, the obvious medical benefits are clear, and that's alone enough reason for us to sign that. But the obvious implications of what's on those records in terms of breaking down the wall or putting another crack in that truth embargo are, I think, obvious to people in this room for sure. Let's go to our esteemed Honorable Paul Hellyer of Canada. We would give you 20 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. My name, as I said, was Paul Hellyer. I'm a former Minister of National Defence for Canada. I served in 3 governments during a total of 23 and a half years as a Member of Parliament. Although as Minister of National Defence, I had sighting reports of UFOs. I was too busy to be concerned about them at the time because I was trying to unify the Army, Navy, and Air Force into a single Canadian Defence Force, and that itself was a kind of battle to the finish. So this was not high on my agenda. But about 10 years ago, I started getting interested due to a young man from Ottawa sending me material on the subject. I told him I was too busy to read it, but he had confidence that someday I would. He sent me a copy of Colonel Corso's book, The Day After Roswell. It took me a while to get around to reading it, but I took it for my summer reading in 2005 and was really impressed with what was contained in it. And what I thought to myself is there are huge issues here, huge issues. And the American people and the people of the world have a right to know what's going on because they're part of it. It's not just an isolated thing. And so after confirming the contents of the book with a retired United States Air Force general, I accepted the invitation of Victor Vigiani, who's over here somewhere, and his cohort, Mike Bird, to speak to a symposium at the University of Toronto. And I said, UFOs are as real as the airplanes flying overhead. That gave me the dubious distinction of being the first person of cabinet rank in the G8 group of countries to say so unequivocally. Since then, I've learned a lot from many sources, including a number of the fantastic witnesses that we have heard these last 4 days. They were so outstanding, I was just really blown away with them, the amount of information that was available. And I appreciate every single one of them. But because I'm not a ufologist, I'm a politician, there are only a few things that I want to add in that particular realm. First is that about in the 1960s sometime, there was a flotilla of UFOs headed south that crossed into NATO territory in Europe. And the Commander-in-Chief of the Supreme Allied Headquarters in Europe was naturally very shaken. Fortunately, or maybe divine providence, before the panic button was pushed, the flotilla turned around and headed back north. Obviously, they had thought maybe they were Russian, and they were very concerned about it. Anyway, an investigation was launched into this whole subject, and a document was prepared which concluded that at least 4 species had been visiting Earth for thousands of years. And this is my own view at this stage as well. So, except for that, there are just a couple of things that we've talked about that I'd like to refer to. And one was that we were referring to them as they until this morning when Linda Moulton Howe, I think she was the first one, actually named 3 different species. I have brought my latest book called Light at the End of the Tunnel, A Survival Plan for the Human Species, as an aide-memoire, and I name 5 different species here. I'm aware of more now. As a matter of fact, I saw a document just a few days ago that mentioned 20. And I think you, Mr. Chairman, were interested in some of the places they might come from. And I have in here Zeta Reticuli, R-E-T-I-C-U-L-I, Reticuli, the Pleiades, Orion, Andromeda, and the Altair star systems. So I don't think we can any more refer to them as they, because they're not an amorphous mass. They are different species and consequently may have different agendas. I don't think we can say that they all have the same agenda any more than we could say that the United States, China, and Russia had the same agenda. Our real interests may be very similar, but as of now, our perceived interests are still quite far apart. One more observation before I begin what I want to say, and that is that we spent quite a bit of time talking about the 66-year-old cadavers. And I was glad to have Linda this morning finally say that there are live ETs on Earth at this present time. And at least 2 of them probably working with the United States government. The other species that I learned about not too long ago was called the tall whites. And this is when Paula Harris broke the story just a few years ago. And through her good offices, I had the chance to talk for about 3 hours with former Airman Charles Hall and listen to this absolutely fascinating story of how he was working with, first of all, he was scared out of his skin, but after that, when he got to know them, how he was working with, and finally they became to trust each other and have a good working relationship with the tall whites at the gunnery range at Indian Springs in Nevada. And these tall whites were living on United States Air Force property and working in cooperation with the United States Air Force and sharing technology with them. He wrote a book, incidentally, called Millennial Hospitality. There are 4 different versions, but Paula says that Millennial Hospitality number 2 is the best. I think that's the one I read, and it's a very interesting read if you want to sort of get inside the problem of what it's like to bump into these people floating across the terrain in the desert. Well, enough on that for now. My interest is in full disclosure. And my only caveat is I think probably I would say 95 to 98% full disclosure. I know of 1 or 2 things that I'm not sure should be in the public domain, at least yet. They will be someday, I'm sure, but not maybe immediately. But just as children survive the idea of the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus when they become adult, I think that tax-paying citizens are quite capable of accepting the new and broader reality that we live in a cosmos teeming with life of various sorts. The fact that some other civilizations are more advanced than we are may be humbling, but that could be a necessary step in our survival. The world is an unholy mess. We have at best until the end of this decade. In my book, I said we have 10 years to stop global warming if we don't want it to be beyond the point of no return. 2 years has gone past since it was written, so I say we have until the end of the decade to arrest global warming. Yet our leaders don't even talk about it very much except in a superficial way. They appear to be more interested in starting wars to control more oil and, in effect, prolong the gravity of the threat. Of course, even if they took the problem seriously, they wouldn't have the finances to finance the transition from oil to the clean economy, to clean energy, because we have an infinitely silly banking and financial system in the Western world. And the United States Congress, I regret to say, is partly responsible, and I'd be glad to elaborate on that later if you're interested. And finally, they need the technology for clean energy. And it exists, and it's being kept secret by the same vested interests who control our destiny. Who are these vested interests, and what are they up to? Well, Senator, you were talking about a military junta. In my opinion, that is true, but I have broadened and deepened the definition to cabal, and the cabal comprises members of the Three Sisters: the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderbergers, and the Trilateral Commission, the International Banking Cartel, the Oil Cartel, members of various intelligence organizations, and select members of the military junta, who together have become a shadow government of not only the United States, but of much of the Western world. The Council on Foreign Relations is the oldest of the Three Sisters, and as early as October 1940, years before Germany surrendered to the Allied armies and to vaporize Hitler's vision of empire, the Council's Economic and Financial Group drafted a memorandum outlining a comprehensive policy, quote, to set forth the political, military, territorial, and economic requirements of the United States in its political potential leadership of the non-German world, including the United Kingdom itself, as well as the Western Hemisphere and the Far East. The Council made no effort to disguise the fact that the purpose of the Grand Area and later world hegemony was to support an expanding U.S. economy, to provide it with raw materials and markets for its products. This was labeled the national interest, quote unquote. It was equally clear that the national interest was the interest of the ruling elite, whose members comprised the Council. The real interests of the majority of rank-and-file Americans was never a factor in the equation. So, Mr. David Rockefeller, who was a member of all three of the sisters, is quoted as saying this at a meeting of the Bilderbergers in Europe. We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subjected to the lights of publicity during those years. But the world is more sophisticated, and prepared to march toward a world government. The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination practiced in past centuries. He, of course, pretended he didn't say that, but the witness, this is reported by Daniel Estulin, a thoroughly reliable reporter who has written the true story of the Bilderberger Group. And if you want to really get inside of what's been going on there for this long time, that's a good place to go. So anyway, you hear what Mr. Rockefeller said, and so there you have it. The aim of the game is a world government comprising members of the cabal who are elected by no one and accountable to no one. And according to Mr. Rockefeller, the plan is well advanced. Does this help you to understand why our civil rights are being taken away from us? I say us, because Canada too is included in the grand plan. A giant leap in the wrong direction followed the end of the Cold War. No one could have been happier than I was when the Berlin Wall came down on November the 9th, 1989. The elation on our side of the curtain was near universal, and very significant on the other side as one country after another regained its freedom. Nearly everyone believed that it was the dawn of a new era of peace and prosperity for people everywhere. There was much talk of a peace dividend. The prospects were dazzling in their scope and diversity. It was a unique and God-given opportunity for a new, braver, and fairer world. We blew it. We blew the chance of a lifetime to do good things. A small group of zealots undermined our golden opportunity to pursue peace, not war, and little did we dream that they had a vastly different vision of the new world order. Their plan, which is now commonly known as the Project for a New American Century, included preventive wars in clear violation of international law, regime change wherever and whenever the U.S. desires, and if they can get away with it without excessive casualties, and the establishment of a kind of economic and cultural hegemony with America acting as constabulary, quote unquote. That was their word, globally. This was to be accomplished without authority of the United Nations and without the restraint of existing international treaties. It would involve a military buildup unprecedented in peacetime history and could trigger an arms race, which is precisely the opposite of the peace dividend that the world had rightly looked forward to. The Machiavellian scheme involved secret police, the curtailment of civil liberties in defiance of the U.S. Constitution, and a moribund economy operating way below its potential. Exactly those features for which the Soviet Union was held in contempt. The initial draft of the document was so controversial when it was leaked to the New York Times that it had to be rewritten, but it was not changed very much, just the cosmetics, enough to make it politically acceptable. The document said this: it may have been easy to persuade President Bush to abandon his stated policy of not getting America more deeply involved in international affairs, but persuading the American people would be more difficult. Sophisticated Americans would question such a giant sea change in policy. The authors of Rebuilding America's Defenses, Strategy, Forces, and Resources for a New Century recognized this difficulty from the outset, because their document contained the following sentence: further, I'm quoting, further, the process of transformation, even if it brings revolutionary changes, is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor. Well, it wasn't too long before they got their catastrophic and catalyzing event. terrorists struck the World Trade Center in New York and the Pentagon in Washington on September the 11th, 2011. Incidentally, they have removed the sentence about Pearl Harbor in the document that you could now get if you went to the internet to find it. Almost the whole world mourned. Canada mourned. The overwhelming majority of Muslims condemned the treacherous attacks. My sympathy for the friends and families of the injured and dead was genuine and unwavering to this day. My sympathy for the US government began to grow a bit thin, however, when I heard President Bush cite the reasons for the attack. And I quote, "Why do they hate us?" he asked rhetorically in an address to the Congress. "They hate what they see right here in this chamber, democratically elected government. Their leaders are self-appointed. They hate our freedoms, our freedom of religion, our freedom of speech, our freedom to vote and assemble and disagree with each other." I felt sad when I heard the president's word. I assumed that he believed what he was saying. But if that were true, he was profoundly ignorant of the real thoughts and feelings of people in other parts of the world. If he wanted to hear the truth, he should have listened to Osama bin Laden, who was well informed concerning the origins of the kind of fanatical hatred of the United States, which has led to such treachery. This is his version of events. Every Muslim must rise to defend his religion. The wind of faith is blowing, and the wind of change is blowing to remove evil from the peninsula of Muhammad. Peace be upon him. As to America, I say to you and its people a few words. I swear to God that America will not live in peace before peace reigns in Palestine and before all the army of infidels depart the land of Muhammad. Peace be upon him. That is clear enough. The dislike of America has nothing to do with democracy versus dictatorship, or wealth, or freedom of religion, or freedom of assembly. It is directly related to American foot-dragging and stick-handling a just settlement of the Palestinian question.
Mr. Hellyer, I'd hate to interrupt. Time has expired, but I'm very happy if the panel has no objection to allow another minute or two to finish your statement. How much time do you think you need to finish it?
I think probably somewhere between 1 and 5 minutes, most.
I think we'll give you 2 minutes to finish your statement, as much as I'd like to grant more. Thank you.
Okay. In short, American foreign policy was the root of the conflict. So here we are more than a decade later fighting another war that can't be won. There is no country on earth powerful enough to protect its citizens against fanatical hate, as we learned from the Boston Marathon. And the mere attempt to pursue the impossible pits neighbor against neighbor and the state power structure against everyone. All of the freedoms won by the millions of men and women who fought and died in World War II are being flushed unceremoniously down the drain. The only hope of peace is a negotiated settlement. This will require a paradigm shift in American attitudes. It involves a de facto renunciation of the plan for a new American energy and the adoption of a pledge of cooperation with all humankind to build the kind of world which we are collectively capable of. Young people everywhere need to be challenged by a noble cause. They need to be involved in arresting global warming, creating a banking system that is just and sustainable, and lead the way in the transformation to the new reality that we have to live in harmony with our celestial neighbors, as well as seeking peace on earth. In a word, we have to become spiritual beings and practice the one tenet that the world's major religions have in common, and that is the Golden Rule. In this field too, and I just want to read one paragraph at this time, if you'll allow me, Mr. Chair. This is from the late Dr. John Mack, an American secular Jewish psychiatrist who became a world leader in interviewing abductees, or experiencers, as he called them, came to this conclusion in a startling book, Passport to the Cosmos. Quote, "Although the aliens are not themselves gods, their behavior is sometimes anything but godlike. Abductees consistently report that the beings seem closer to the Godhead than we are, acting as messengers, guardian spirits, or angels, intermediaries between us and the divine source. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now hear from Richard Dolan for 10 minutes.
Thank you, distinguished members of the committee. And let me just say it's been an honor for me personally to be here with you all week, to be able to give statements to you and to chat with some of you privately as well. Regarding disclosure, I have often felt that disclosure on the matter of UFOs and ETs, possible extraterrestrials, is a paradox. It's impossible, but it is inevitable. It's impossible because there is no political motivation for it. It's inevitable, however, because our leaders are not the only factor in this equation. There are other beings, after all. But mainly, I would say there's us, the people, who are going through this greatest social, cultural, and especially technological transformation in the history of humanity. In fact, I would say that we are the game changers. Someday, and it won't be too long in the future, something is going to force someone's hand. It could be a major sighting, it could be a major leak, something that can no longer be denied. After all, we are fast approaching what experts in artificial intelligence call the singularity, when computing intelligence exceeds our own. In such a future, I ask you, can we really think we will still be stuck in neutral on this issue? Something will force the president's hand. He or she will finally hold that long-awaited press conference and make that bombshell statement. It might go something like this. I have been advised by the National Security Council and heads of our intelligence community that there is a reality to some of the UFO phenomenon, in that some UFOs are real physical craft not manufactured by any known civilization on Earth, or words to that effect. It's the kind of statement that many proponents of UFO disclosure would like to hear, but the real question is, what next? Because there would be quite a few follow-up questions. At the top of the list will be questions about who these other beings are and what their agenda or agendas might be. And this will be a very difficult question for any president to answer. In the first place, there is a likelihood that even the leaders of the black budget or breakaway society that have been on top of this for years, they may not even know, or at least not fully. And what if they do know? And moreover, what if at least some of that answer includes information that might be upsetting? Divining the intentions of non-human visitors or permanent residents, whatever they may be, might not be the easiest thing to do. But it's entirely possible, judging from the data we do have, that some of them may not care very much about humanity. Some may not. And what if an agenda has been determined within the intelligence community, and this agenda includes something to do with alleged abduction phenomena? And even if that isn't true, does any president honestly believe he or she can contain rampant speculation along these lines? And even if the intentions of these other beings are said to be neutral or positive, there will clearly be tremendous suspicion by large swaths of humanity. This will not be an easy sell. There will already be a sizable number of people predisposed to interpreting these other beings as nothing less than demonic. Short of bringing one of these entities to a podium and subjecting it to hours and days and weeks of questions by an insatiable public, it's very likely that any moment of disclosure will not satisfy the public the way it would like to be regarding alien motivations. That's only the beginning of the problems. One early and obvious question that will arise, one which will have deep, profound political implications, will be very simple. How long have you managed to keep this secret all these years? Consider that our entire society has been told that UFOs do not represent anything truly anomalous, that ETs or aliens are definitely not here on Earth interacting with us, that UFO believers may be well-meaning but had been mistaken about all of that. This has been a mindset embedded within all of our major institutions. our educational institutions from primary school through universities and postdoctoral levels, throughout our major news organizations in which an open belief in UFOs is a third rail for one's career, throughout our scientific establishment for sure, and also throughout our political structure. Political careers have been destroyed, or at least severely undermined, by the UFO taint. Remember what happened to Dennis Kucinich in 2008, after it became known that many years before he had seen a UFO. Never mind the fact that the two witnesses he had been with came out and corroborated the sighting. They saw the same thing. All of these institutions and others have treated the UFO topic as nothing more than a joke, something suitable for immature minds. Can it really be that the professors throughout the United States uniformly have dismissed this phenomenon without any cooperation from the intelligence community? Ditto the world of science, politics, and media. Well, no, not when the most modest amount of research shows strong intelligence community influence over all of these institutions. In other words, people will see very clearly that the national security apparatus has created a global culture that has suffocated the truth. Researchers will begin to investigate in a serious way just how these relationships have undermined the credibility of all those institutions and undermined our apprehension of truth. The result will be a major cultural and institutional house cleaning, but it won't stop there. Citizens will naturally want to know specifics about the structure of secrecy itself. That is, they will want to know, if the US president has been out of the loop all these years, as it seems, then who exactly has been in the loop? Who has been running the UFO cover-up? If the answer is anything along the lines of my own research so far, it will show that the cover-up has long ago gravitated away from formal presidential authority into international and private hands. It's not that the US president is a non-player in all of this, but rather is more like the public face of the true power elite that stands behind. We all, I think, have come to understand this when it comes to power in general, and this will likely be the case when we begin a sophisticated analysis of UFO secrecy. In other words, the moment of disclosure will trigger an intellectual revolution worldwide relating to the true structure of power on planet Earth. It will be a moment in which the world sees and acknowledges that the emperor has been wearing nothing at all. The political fallout will be tremendous, and a great battle will develop within the first year of disclosure. Think of it this way: just because the president has been forced into making an announcement doesn't mean that the CIA and all the other intelligence groups that have been managing this will simply walk away. There has been a concerted effort spanning an entire human lifetime to control this topic. A great deal has been invested, and mere disclosure is not going to change that. The real issue in the immediate post-disclosure world will be who controls the spin on the story. Because right away there will be a great divide, a chasm. Once this topic is available for open discussion, you can be sure that people around the world will be demanding answers. You can be just as sure that on the other side of the fence, information will be handed out as sparingly as possible. Government spin doctors will be out in great numbers trying to control the situation according to national security policy, although this time independent UFO searchers may get a public hearing that they hadn't gotten before. If the official spokespersons are making misleading or false statements, it's going to be a bit easier post-disclosure for independent researchers to point this out, because this time the world will be much more likely to listen. And there will be many, many more investigators into this topic after disclosure than there are today. How all that will turn out, only time will tell. There are so many other messy issues relating to global finance, energy, truth commissions, lawsuits, cultural transformations, cultural wars, religious and spiritual changes, scientific paradigm shifts, and ultimately geopolitical changes that will allow us to meet the challenge of, shall we call them others, here on planet Earth in some sort of coordinated, hopefully logical manner, and even more hopefully in some way that answers to the people rather than a handful of elite human players. And for that, We will need a groundswell of public pressure from below and tremendous political energy, ethics, and courage to take on the black budget culture that has dominated this subject for so long, and to begin a long, hard fight to reclaim some measure of freedom and dignity for humanity while we begin a new, better, and more mature phase of our existence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Golan. Now we'll go to our next witness, Daniel Sheehan, for 10 minutes.
Good afternoon. Again, I point out that I'm speaking in this context as our general counsel here for this gathering and our meeting, and I do this in the context of having served as an attorney, as I pointed out in my initial comments on the first day we gathered, that I have, for various reasons, ended up at being the attorney for a number of different issues having to do with attempting to uncover ongoing cover-ups. From the time that I served as one of the attorneys for the New York Times in the Pentagon Papers case, having seen the 47 volumes of the concealment of a policy that was completely contrary to what was being publicly professed and told to the Congress, in fact. And then I ended up being counsel in the Karen Silkwood case, uncovering the fact that our Central Intelligence Agency was smuggling 98% pure bomb-grade plutonium to Israel, et cetera. I pointed out at the beginning of this conversation this week. And I pointed out that I ended up in the Iran-Contra case as being the ones who, one of the ones that brought the information, attempted to bring it to Congress. And I want to point out here, just at the very top of my conversation, to repeat the reaction on the part of Peter Rodino, who was the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee at the time, when the information concerning the off-the-shelf, self-financing covert operations enterprise that had been set up by the chief of covert operations for the Central Intelligence Agency, Theodore Shackley, under George H.W. Bush, that when he was told this by Scott Armstrong, one of his trusted confidants, that Peter Rodino's response was, my God, Scott, I've been telling people for years that if they didn't like the way that our American policy was going, that they should write a letter to their congressperson. But if their congressperson did not respond, they should vote for someone else to be their congressperson. But if what you're telling me here is true, why then we haven't even been in charge. I'm not going to allow the United States Congress to investigate anything like that. Now, that's an absolute quote from Peter Rodino as the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and this had only to do with the fact that there was a covert operation going on attempting to supply military equipment to the Contras. Now, what we're dealing with here is we've come full circle during the course of this week. We've discovered that the three major questions that have been in front of us, that being that what in the world is going on here with this phenomenon of so-called unidentified flying objects, or the flying saucers themselves, when we move beyond the unidentified nature of them, and these beings that seem to be associated with these vehicles that have been seen on a number of occasions. That's one of the big major questions. And the second major question is, well, who in the world is it that knows what the answer to this question is, since so many of the government officials don't seem to know, yourselves included. One of the extraordinary events of the week has been watching the transition take place from 6 of our trusted and longtime representatives actually coming to discover that the information that actually exists about this is extraordinary and very detailed. It addresses the issue of the radar sightings. It addresses the issues of all the questions that have been asked. And it comes to an observation that not only does the Congress not know about this, but many people throughout the executive branch don't know about this. And so that this question of who is it that does know about this Is there anybody that knows about this? And what we have heard over and over again in the testimony is that there are many pieces of evidence that indicate that this is known about, that there was an agency set up by President Truman shortly after the discovery of the crash site at Roswell in 1947, the Majestic 12 group. And there's been clear testimony that I believe is credible, would be credible in a court of law, that this organization has, for various reasons, taken this issue out from under the oversight of our Congress, out from under the control of our executive branch, and has taken this into a realm of semi-private control. And what you'll notice is that as we come to the last panel of our week together here, the issue tends to turn more and more to that issue. What has happened? What has happened to our country when a national security state seems to have arisen to conceal certain types of information from our people, from our congressional representatives, even from some of our presidents? And so that question seems to be in front of us right now, attempting to understand the nature of this elite group. And so what we want to do also is face the third question, is that when you get past these procedural questions to the ultimate question of who are these beings, what are the implications for our human family if we are in fact at a point of some rather dramatic transition. And I believe that what we're going to be experiencing in the very near future has been foreshadowed, as I mentioned earlier, by the position that's being taken by the Catholic Church and the Vatican, that they are very clearly attempting to move into a position of utilizing the increasing discovery of more and more planets on which they are more and more confident that life is going to be discovered, and that they're going to eventually not only recognize that at least microscopic life has been discovered, but that a civilization has been discovered, and they're going to begin by pointing out that it's okay because they're very far away. We've discovered them, we've found the information, but they're very far away, and they're going to engage in a process of feathering this consciousness into our people, and that they're only then going to point out that this civilization seems to be a highly developed technological civilization, and we will then reveal the existence of communication mechanisms that we have developed, whereby we can have a longer range diplomatic type of negotiation with this civilization. And they're going to say, let's not turn to the past. Let's not reflect upon all this information and evidence that's been around for a long time, that they seem to be here. We've known about it. There's been concealment about this. There may be concealment of certain technology that they've made, we had available to us. Just as was said by the Obama administration, let's not look back at George W. Bush's administration. Let's not review the question of the torture and the lying to the Congress of the United States to get us involved in this. Let's not do that. Let's look forward and be constructive. That's how we're all trained. And what I'm saying is that I think we've come to try to share some of that consciousness here this week. What can we do to look forward to this? And that's why the resolution that's been put forth here to try to reach out and have a set of conferences sponsored by the United Nations General Assembly, start to reveal this information so we can participate in this, to avoid a dialectical confrontation between the people of our country and this national security state apparatus, some of the details of which have been pointed out here in our final panel. And I share in that wish to have this done constructively and peacefully, and I believe that we can do that. And I believe that you, as former members of Congress, recently retired, the reality is that if the six of you go and sit down with various people in Congress, not to expect that they're going to change overnight and say, oh, look, let's have a hearing on this and expose it to our people. But the fact that you have come to discover just this week so much more than you ever knew was going on, that you are experts at trying to share this information with people in your regions of the country. And we have from all different parts of the country, from Alaska to California to other states of our country, right, in the south of our country and in the Midwest of our country. We can, if you will reach out and try to talk with your people in your own districts about this issue, to take upon yourself that risk of the potential ridicule, the potential criticism. The question you've been asking yourself, all of you, what am I going to do now? What am I going to do now that I have left the Congress? Am I going to continue to represent the people in my district? Am I going to attempt to educate them? Because if you have come to the same conclusion that I came to when I was given the privilege of representing Dr. John Mack, if you've come to the same conclusion that I have, this is one of the most important issues that you've ever encountered in your life. And you are the most skilled people to go and share this with your own constituency and reach out and help us.
Okay,
And that's what we're asking for you to do.
Thank you for your statement, Mr. Chan. We'll now begin the questioning of our witnesses, and we're going to change the order. We're going to start with Dr. Bookman. We're just going to work our way down this way, just so you know.
Mr. Dolan, we've had this conversation before, and I think it might be helpful to the committee too. How many crashes do you find credible, roughly?
I've never bothered to tally them up. There are a couple of very good books, studies that have been done, one by a gentleman who's here, Dr. Kevin Randall, another by Ryan Wood.
How many do your colleagues generally, as you look at their materials, have you concluded?
I don't think 10 would be outrageous.
Okay, so maybe 10 craft have been recovered, 10 crashes. Let's talk about those 10. We assume that we're not the most enlightened, caring, loving folk in the galaxy, I gather. Is there any evidence that the colleagues of these crashed extraterrestrials have come looking for them or attempted to recover their crashed technology, or their brothers and sisters who might have been held in captivity, no matter how comfortable here?
Well, all we're dealing with are leaks and more leaks and stories and claims. It would not be illogical. There have been claims that have been made. Proving these, getting corroboration is another story.
Thank you.
Yes, Representative Woolsey.
Thank you. I think we should shorten this as best we can, except for the Honorable Paul Heller. One thing I'd like to say to Paul Heller is, I think we know the answer about who knows about this. When you two guys brought it up, and I think Mr. Heller answered it for us. It's the three sisters. I mean, they know the industrial complexes, the oil cabal, the banking cabal, they know. They've been controlling this for a long time. So we know they know, and we know they've been controlling it. So our question is now, what do we do about it? I don't think it does a lot of good to go out and insult the people that are going to have to do something about it, but we can do more than we're doing, and we have to get money out of politics. One, we have to control the press. I don't mean control the press, what they can see. We have to expand the press so that 3 or 5 corporations don't own the communications in our country. And we have to do something about our education system so that our students graduate knowing how to question, staying in school in the first place, but they have to learn how to question, they have to learn how to analyze, they have to make decisions that are in their own best interests, not in the best interests of the top 1% of the wealthiest people in this country. And we have to have economic justice. I mean, there's so much that we have to do in this country. And if we had a country that was not based on money and had a press that would speak truth to power and an educated public, we'd be demanding and wanting to hear everything that I heard this week from all of you. It isn't there, it isn't happening. And we just do, I mean, we have so much work to do. I mean, and then the question of what, well, my question is, what would it looked like, why would it be upsetting to get this information out? What does upsetting information look like?
Well, Ms. Woolsey, if I might have something to say on that.
Get back to the-
I had a conversation with a gentleman who I will just say is of absolutely impeccable credentials, who told me of his personal knowledge of a briefing that was given to President Jimmy Carter back in June of 1977 on exactly this matter. Now, he doesn't know the details of what was said, but he does know that it was a briefing about the extraterrestrial presence. This was in June of 1977. It was the beginning of his first year. And at the end of that meeting, that the president was seen with his head in his hands, elbows on the desk, and weeping, or deeply upset. Something was told to him that was very upsetting. I asked this individual if he had any idea what it was. He did not bother to speculate. But I will say that I have another gentleman who was a senior cabinet member in the first Reagan administration, who similarly told of being taken for several weeks after he got his job to an underground facility to receive a briefing, and was deeply upset because, as he said to a trusted family member, I have a daughter, and I am terrified for her. So there's something going on in which this phenomenon is either threatening, or we might speculate beyond the control of the political powers that are officially supposed to be representing us. I suspect
Well,
both.
it is beyond control. It's the three sisters that are running it. So, thank you.
Thank you, and let's go to Representative from Maryland.
Thank you very much. I want to, for a few moments, dwell a bit on a problem that was mentioned by both Mr. Hillier and Dr. Bookman. That is the constitutional issue here. For the moment, we are the undisputed economic and military superpower in the world. We are a bit less than 5% of the world's population. We're about one person out of 22 in the world. And we have we represent about a fourth of the world's economy, which means we have about a fourth of all the good things in the world. How come? How come? We no longer have the best work ethic in the world. All you have to do is drive around and watch for people bending their back and sweating and working. You won't see very many white faces, and you don't see very many black faces. You see Hispanic faces. We no longer have the most respect for the nuclear family. This year, almost half our babies will be born out of wedlock. We no longer have the most respect for technical education. This year, the Chinese will graduate 7 times as many engineering students as we graduate. How is it then that we are so darn fortunate that we're the undisputed economic and military superpower in the world? I think it's because of our enormous respect, and we have a fourth of all the good things in the world. I think it's our enormous respect for civil liberties. There's no other constitution, there's no other Bill of Rights that protects civil liberties like ours. And I think, by the way, you've mentioned it, gentlemen, we are not a democracy. We have democratic process, but we are a republic. Benjamin Franklin asked. Yeah. There's a fundamental difference there. There's a fundamental difference there. I'm very concerned that because our government today so easily ignores the Constitution to do what they think are good things, that tomorrow, like some of the functions of our government that I think are extra-constitutional, if not unconstitutional, like ignoring the First Amendment requirement that the citizens have a right to petition the government for a redress of grievances, and there's a grievance that there's not been a hearing on this for a very long time. If the government can ignore the Constitution to do good things today, tomorrow they can ignore the Constitution to do bad things. Other countries have done it. When my ex-chief of staff, who is now my colleague, called me and asked me if I was interested to do this and warned me that there was a big probability that a lot of people would relegate me to the lunatic fringe for coming here, I told her that the primary reason that I would come was that there's a serious constitutional issue here. The citizens have a right for their government to tell them what's going on here. And I want to thank both of you for bringing up this constitutional issue, because I think it is a very serious one. A government which ignores the Constitution to do good things today, what they think are good things today, can ignore the Constitution to do bad things tomorrow, because they will rationalize that they are good things tomorrow. So thank you very much for your shared concern of this issue. Now yield back.
Senator Corbelli, you've got 5 minutes for questions.
How much time do I have now?
You'll have 5 minutes for
5
questions, and then whatever time afterwards, we'll start with you on closing statements.
Okay, good, very good. What I'd like to do is ask Minister Hellier, you know, we all talk about the problem. In fact, that's all I hear is defining the problem. We got to think in terms of solutions. What's your solution to the problem?
You have got problems. Wall Street runs your economy, and the military, you elect a president who is presumably commander-in-chief of the armed forces, but he's not cleared to know what the troops and his commander are actually doing. So I think, you know, there are some big problems, but I think Congress ultimately has the key to both the future of the United States and of the world. And this is what bothers me, because they're not exercising their power to change the things that have to be changed. But if you'll indulge me, I'd like to read 2 pages from advice from the extraterrestrials. And I think they've got a lot of good advice, because they know what's going on more than we do sometimes. This is a quote from Jim Sparks, who was probably the most abducted of all the people who have been abducted. And he was taken away one night late on. He'd been abducted dozens of times before that. And he said, "I found myself standing in that abandoned carnival park, clear-headed and fully conscious. There were those creatures again, and I could see that their holograms of human faces were cast over their faces to disguise their true appearance and make me feel less apprehensive. I noticed that each alien seemed to be concentrating on communicating or transmitting its thoughts to the creature to my left. They seemed to be of like mind, as though combining their consciousness into one telepathic voice." They continued, and now this is quoting the ETs. "There are some things you need to understand. Yes, it's true that we have been in contact with your government and heads of power. It is also true that It is also true that agreements have been made and kept secret from your people. It is also true that in the past, some of your people have lost their lives or have been badly hurt to protect this secret. Our hands had no part in this. We contacted your leaders because your planet is in grave trouble. Your leaders said the vast majority of your population wasn't ready for anything like us yet. So we made time agreements with your leaders as to when your people would be made aware of our presence. That part of the agreement has not at all been kept. It was also agreed that in the meantime, steps would be taken to correct the environmental conditions of your planet with our advice and technology. We say advice, quote unquote, because we respect the fact that this is your planet, not ours. They also broke that agreement. This is Jim now, I felt an awful wave of emotion from them, the feeling of abandonment. To feel any emotion from them at all was amazing, but this was quite overwhelming. You aren't giving up on us, are you? I asked. There was a long, silent pause, and I received the transmitted feeling of tremendous loss. Well, are you? I asked. No. I felt an immediate sense of relief straight from my own emotions. But then the extraterrestrials again, your air, your water are contaminated. Your forests, jungles, trees, and plant life are dying. There are several breaks in your food chain. You have an overwhelming amount of nuclear and biological weapons, which include nuclear and biological contamination. Your planet is overpopulated. Warning, it is almost to the point of being too late, unless your people act. There are better ways of deriving energy and food needs without causing your planet any damage. Those in power are aware of this and have the capability of putting these methods into worldwide use. I let this digest for a moment. I definitely had the feeling that these creatures are speaking as one. Then I asked, why aren't we doing that now? Silence. I was willing to wait. I'd come a long way to be treated like this by them, to have this kind of meeting. Apparently, I had earned their respect and trust. The best part was that I was getting direct, truthful answers to my questions. I decided that I would milk this rare situation to its fullest, asking as many questions as I could get away with, even personal ones. I repeated my question and they answered. Those in power view it as a military and security threat. That upset me. You mean to tell me that the people in power have the ability to save and better the planet, and they aren't doing it? Amnesty. What do you mean? Complete amnesty to those in power, governments and leaders who have been suppressing the truth, that they can't be held liable for any past wrong deeds. It is the only way these leaders can come forward with the truth. It is necessary that you do this in order to work together and survive.
And the
I
senator's
think that's
time
some
has
wonderful
expired.
advice, straight from the extraterrestrials. I think Congress should exercise its power, and I know that they'd get some job owning, but they have the ultimate power. They could say to the junta, we want you to do this. We'll give you amnesty, protection. We want you to do this, and you're going to do it. And if you don't, we'll cut your funding off, except for salaries and wages, until you do it. Because it's in the national interest, and it's in the world interest, and we want to know what's going on, and specifically, we want the energy sources to put into effect to save the world before it's too darn late.
Thank you very much. And to start the closing statements by Senator Gravel. Well, is there
As much as you want.
yeah, you get your closing statement.
Don't ever say that to me. I filibuster.
I should have warned Dr. Buckman about that, but anyway,
I'll be
go ahead.
reasonable. I'll be reasonable. Let's put it that way. First off, if I've sounded angry, I apologize for that. But there's a reason. I am angry, very angry, but I really want to point out that I love my country. I'm very critical of it because it needs to be criticized heavily. I consider myself a patriot, but I don't buy into. But first and foremost, and I used to end a lot of my speeches, and I lasted for 12 years, I am a citizen of the planet first and American second, and my priorities are on that way. Make no mistake about that. Now, when we're analyzing the problem, whether it's the extraterrestrial situation issue or the 9/11 issue, which of course ginned up the ability of the crazies to really go after the world, we have to start and be a little humble and say, hey, those of us that have held office for a period of time, you know, it's during that period of time that things have gone to hell. And when people say, well, you know, we ought to take back our country, we never had our country. If you read the Constitution that was passed in 87, and 89, the First Amendment. You know, we were putting in slavery for infinity. And if you look at, and if you, those of you that have this brochure, you'll look at all of our forebears that said the people should have the right to change their government. And that's based upon the Declaration of Independence, where all human beings are created equal. Well, 12 years later, they're in Philadelphia, and they're not creating all human beings equal. What they're doing is they're making a distinction that white males are the only equal ones, and if you have enough property, the rest. And so those who get married to the Constitution, they like to rip the Constitution apart. And then when you say about, obeying the Constitution, after the Civil War amendments, which really fundamentally is the only improvement made in the Constitution of size because it expanded the franchise. And if you look at the amendments, the rest of it are just housekeeping. And so from the Civil War on, we had 90 years where, 12, 13 states were in total violation of the Constitution of the United States, and nobody gave a darn about it. And the political parties were all part of the conspiracy. So when you advance from there to here and look around and see how our scientific advancement has been so explosive, and we are stuck in a system, a structure of governance that's 250 years old that is totally irrelevant to dealing with our problems that we face today. And then so we look at, say, oh, we're going to go to the Congress. I got to tell you, I've said that earlier in the week, it's a dead letter, and hold your breath, it's never going to happen. And it's not that I'm demeaning the Congress, I've been there, and I'll tell you that they don't have the power that you think they have. It was always...
They won't use it.
But no, I don't want to engage in anything. I respect your views, but I just want to tell you that the problem, you have to come to some kind of a search internally with some humility and say, maybe, just maybe, our structure of governance is deficient. We don't have a democracy, never had it. What we have is representative government. That's what came out of the age of enlightenment, was representative government, where the majority of the people give their power away to a small minority. And that small minority, and you want to know what happened? $4 billion was spent in the last election, and our government, the Congress, the executive, the bureaucracy, the judiciary, they are owned lock, stock, and barrel by the Wall Street, the military-industrial complex, and all of the special interests that we find abroad. And then when you see what's going on with NATO, is nothing but the militarization, the globalization of the military-industrial complex. That's what's going on. And I referred to a study where it showed that 1,300 corporations with interlocking directorates and family ties own 60% of the wealth of the world. And then you've gone through the litany of the Bilderberg Group and all of that group. Sure, they do what's natural to them. They've got power, and they're clever enough to keep it and work for it. Our task is to look at the structure of why we're failing as human beings. And I say all of us, because we've had testimony replete of people in the military who are supposed to be courageous and prepared to charge up the hill, that they defer to authority that silences them. And if you reason it out, it doesn't make any sense that they have to keep secrets like that. I had to make that decision in the Senate and put myself at risk when releasing the Pentagon Papers. Those were top secret documents. And the rest of the Congress was stymied like little kids in school that you could go read it, but you couldn't take any notes. They tried to impeach me, and I was saved by one person, Mike Mansfield. He had such power in the Senate. He stepped before a delegation led by Gerald Ford, brought it with Hugh Scott, went to visit him and said, well, we got to deal with this Gravel for what he's done. And Mansfield turned to them, sucking on his pipe. He says, he's done nothing that I know of, and they walked right out. That was the end of the story. That saved my career. And when I went to see Mansfield, and I get emotional about it, because when he turned to me, he says, Mike, if I'd had your courage, I'd have done the same thing. But stop and think what I did. The whole Congress had bought into the secrecy of these documents, and I had turned it all over and made the Supreme Court moot and put to shame the newspapers that were now afraid to do that. And the issue with the Supreme Court. Our government representative government is designed to keep the people in civic adolescence. That's what it's the design. What is adolescence? Oh, I want that, but I don't want to pay any taxes. I want that, but I don't want to pay any taxes. That's adolescent behavior. Now, how do we bring the people to adulthood, civic adulthood? How do we do it the way we bring our children up? We give our children responsibility as they age, and then they come to adulthood. So it's taking responsibility. But when you have a structure of government that doesn't permit the people to take responsibility, you guarantee the continuation of civic adolescence. And so what I've tried to do with this work, and this represents the last 25 years of my public life, and it'll continue until the day I die. And that is that the answer is the people. It's not your leaders. Don't trust your leaders. It's the people. There's only two venues for change. One is the government, wherein structurally the problem exists, and the other is the people. The government won't, but the people can't, because they give their power away. I'll close on one quote which says it all. And that is very simple. It's a quote from 2,000 years ago. Marcus Cicero defined freedom as participation in power. You will never see fundamental change in our society or global society until the power can be relegated to the people directly. It's just that simple. I make that as a prediction. I've resigned myself that I'll keep working, but I won't see this in my lifetime. Won't see it in my lifetime. But someday, people are going to wake up and say, hey, you know, what's so worrisome about empowering the people to be able to do what? When Cicero says freedom is power, is participation in power, what is the central power of all governments? Whether tyrannies or democracy, well, republics. It's the ability to make laws that stand outside of ourselves and that we're supposed to obey them. At this point in time, only representatives make laws, and these representatives de facto are controlled by these forces beyond our control because they control society. So the answer is to find a way to empower people to be able to make laws. Therefore, they will have the power to, one, to do away with the secrecy in government. Does it surprise you that 50% of the people don't even care about government? And this is not Einstein's theory. Well, it is Einstein's theory, and that was, he said that to repeat over and over again something that doesn't work is the definition of insanity. That's a great theory. So we vote for Democrats, nothing really happens. We vote for Republicans, nothing really happens. We go to Britain, we see one government, that government, nothing really happens to advance the needs of the human race. And so you can only come to one conclusion, that the answer is not with the elites, because they're going to, and they manipulate our elections. Mind you, I raise money from special sources to run for office, and I manipulate my constituency. I do that, and I'm sure any successful politician has done that, is to manipulate the constituency for your thinking. And to think that we in elective office want a turnout of voters, hell no. We want a turnout of our voters, not the general voters. So the whole structure of representative government is very deficient. So let me lead with this, that I have personally unreserved faith in the people. And if you don't have faith in the people, what do you have faith in? The leaders? And that's exactly where we're at today. And so if you want to see this issue of being able to maturely, and I don't think we have close to the maturity to deal with the extraterrestrials. And we don't have the, now, we're told, and I'll accept that we have the scientific ability to send ET home. Well, it's being sequestered away from the people, and that's a tragedy, because there's a lot more out there that could benefit the human race, but we can't get our hands on it because we don't have the structure of governance to be able to go at it. And so let me close on it. If those of you that don't have this, you can go to our website, National Citizens Initiative for Democracy. And that's hopefully, it won't succeed in my lifetime, but it is my contribution and a legacy. Forget the Pentagon Papers, forget the nuclear critique, forget the end of the draft. This is the contribution that I think is worthwhile, and I won't live to see it. Thank you very much.
If you will get in your car, and it'll be a little more spectacular in the wintertime because the air is thinner and it holds less moisture. And if you will drive out of the city away from the lights and away from the air pollution, and you drive up a mountain several thousand feet, and you don't have to go very far to do that. 100 miles in West Virginia will do it. And on a cloudless winter night, you look up into the sky. You will just be astounded at the Milky Way. Wow, it looks like they took a whitewash brush across the sky. There are so darn many stars there. More than 1 billion. And then when you recognize that our star is a pretty mediocre star in this galaxy of the Milky Way, and then when you know that there are probably 1 billion other galaxies this size. You know, as a scientist, there just has to be another sun out there, another star, and another planet that has characteristics appropriate for the development of life. And I think you have to be very arrogant and very presumptive to believe that that we're the only civilization in the universe, and the most advanced civilization. Wow, we're still killing each other in stupid wars, and not all that long ago, I'm Anglo-Saxon German descent, my forebears were wearing skins in a Stone Age, running around Europe. As I mentioned earlier, when my chief of staff with whom I now work said that I was invited to come here and warned me that you might be ridiculed for it, I told her that I was going to come because of the constitutional issue, if for no other, which I mentioned. Because if your government can rationalize that it's okay to deny you this hearing for your good, tomorrow they can be doing a lot of things that are very hurtful to you, because in the grand scheme of things, they will rationalize that it's for your good. Thank you very much, those of you who organized this. I've really been privileged to be here. I'm honored that you invited me to come. And thank you to the witnesses. And I think back through these 5 days, and the witnesses that have come, some of them at considerable personal price. And a special thanks to those who have borne this secret for 40, 50 years, and now near their deathbed, come forward so that we can know. I ask myself, why this cloak of secrecy? Clearly there's a cloak of secrecy here. And I ask myself why. My wife says that I'm the eternal optimist. And I like to think the best of everybody until proven different. And so I want to believe that those who made decisions were patriotic Americans, believing that at the time they made the decision which was in the best interest of their country. This was just a few years after the War of the Worlds thing, where the East Coast was panicked when they thought we were being invaded by extraterrestrials. And that was one concern that I think they must have had that was fairly recent in their memory. Another concern would be, gee, there really is some advanced technology here, isn't there? And wouldn't it be tragic if the Soviets had that rather than us, or shared it with us? And so I think for these two reasons, they could very well have rationalized it. And that decision was made very early. Apparently, it may have gone clear to the office of the president, because within a few hours after they issued that press release that said that a flying saucer had crashed, they came with this ridiculous press release saying, gee, it was just a balloon, we goofed. But they did send what they found to Wright Field, and they did send a number of people out to vacuum the area for several days. These three things alone tell me that the Air Force knows that they're not telling us the truth. I hope that that after 60-odd years of known incidents, after the Soviet Union has gone, that these two justifications they recognize are no longer valid, and that they might come and tell the American people, there is something out there that we can't explain. And we're sorry that for all these years that we rationalized that it was the national interest of our country to keep this from you. I may be the eternal optimist, but I like to think the best of people. Again, thank you so very much for putting this on. Thank you for honoring me to be a part of it. Thank you.
Yes, I certainly want to thank everybody that's been involved in this, this whole operation this week. And I just want to say how grateful I am for being contacted and asked to participate, and how glad I am that I accepted this opportunity to be on this panel. But I want to focus my closing statement and keep it very short on the witnesses. I still can't believe the quality of the witnesses that we've seen this week. There's been about 40, this is meant as a total compliment. I can't, when I contemplated coming here to Washington for this, I certainly couldn't imagine that you could assemble in one conference that number of people with that level of capability, competence, commitment, and intelligence. The witnesses are far better than I think any one of us had a right to expect when we accepted this. And maybe it's because I don't know enough about ufology, but...
And Congressman, there is 5 more behind every one of those 40 that could come forward just as strong.
I'm starting to have no doubt about that at all after hearing what just a small sampling of pilots and controllers and people on the ground that have seen things and witnessed things. And the integrity and believability, honesty, and clear thought of each of these testimonies was something to behold. I have to say that. I'm just very impressed on that, and I'm going to conclude the remarks by saying to all of the witnesses, and each and every one witness, if you're a researcher, you keep on researching and redouble those research efforts. If you're someone in the media that's trying to understand this and help promote it, work harder at it. And you're doing a good job, don't get me wrong, but I just want you to redouble this because if it's true, and I've announced before I even came here that I believe in extraterrestrial life, and that was from a religious standpoint. So I've been focusing on scientific evidence of it, and let me just say this. I'm like sorry the name slips me, but the person that used to be the minister of, or in the Ministry of Defense, Nick Pope. I'm like Dick Pope. I haven't come to a definite scientific conclusion on that question, but I hope in this short lifetime I have left, I can based on science. And if you researchers will redouble the efforts, and if anybody that can help fund and resource this kind of effort can get committed and get going, because, hey, I can tell you, this must have cost some real money, what you've done here, and that's a compliment to the fundraising skill that you obviously all have that have been involved. So I'd just like to end with this final sentence. Keep working hard. Use this as just kind of a springboard to redoubling your efforts. Thank you very much.
Well, I want to thank my colleagues, and thanks for putting this group of 6 together. It could not have been better balanced. It was balanced politically. It was balanced gender-wise, absolutely, and it was balanced with our beliefs, you know, and it's so clear. People say we don't get along. We get along, and when you take the politics out of it, it makes it a lot easier. Now I will say what we say in the Congress when we want to save time, is that I echo our chairman's viewpoint on the witnesses. He said it perfectly. The knowledge, the experience, and the integrity of this group of witnesses made it this such an important week for me, and I know for many others. Actually, with this amazing group of witnesses, and that we heard, and as we talked about this subject, it made it absolutely impossible for me to remain a skeptic. And but I don't believe that it's about, I don't believe it's about belief. I believe this whole situation is about information. And the existence of UFOs and ETs is becoming accepted worldwide. And the information we received was so important to support that and defend it. But it's time for our government, the U.S. government, to come to the party. It's time for our government to declassify and disclose what they know. And it is time that they trust the people of this country, that they can handle this information, whatever they think we can't handle, because they are dead wrong, and it's going to get in the way of the get along of this nation we live in. So we're not living in a flat earth society. We know it, and it's time that our government realizes it as well, and that they make it possible for us to go forward. Because if they don't, I agree that the general public will. And I thank you again for making this all possible. Thank you.
Absolutely blessed to have been given the opportunity to fill Congresswoman Hooley's seat when she left earlier today. I'd like to echo what Congressman Cook said about the heroic actions of the witnesses who came here this week, and what Congressman Bartlett said about those brilliant stars under that winter night in West Virginia. But what I'm here to suggest is that we have stars who've shone just as brightly this week, and other human beings who are here who were just as heroic. And I'd like to share a little bit about that. I shared my gratitude for Congressman Kilpatrick, who was the first to say, yeah, I'll do it. But there's other stories around that I'd like to share that I'd like everyone in the room to be aware of as well. Just before I do that, though, I'd also like to make a call out to those watching this on the internet stream, or those who might be in the room, or those who might see it in the weeks, months, years to come, who have the opportunity to be heroic, who do know about this, who have evidence, who could testify, who live perhaps in fear. And my call out to you is to do what these 6 members of Congress have done, which is to be heroic, to stand up and recognize an allegiance, if not to the Constitution, then to your fellow men on this planet, men and women on the planet, to share what you know to be true about this issue. Congressman Bartlett has been commuting 2.5 hours every morning to be here. 2.5 hours back to his farm in Virginia. He's 86 years old. 87. Sir, you're a hero to me. Your commitment to our Constitution and the principles of liberty that it embodies, and yes, Senator Gravel's right, it never embodied them perfectly, but it was a huge advance in the history of humanity on this planet to grant liberty to the people to see the government not as the giver of rights, but as of rights being self-evident and inalienable. For each individual, your commitment to that is heroic. Congressman Woolsey, who's sitting next to me right now, authored legislation to protect whistleblowers that this government, this Congress refused to pass. And we've been, if you haven't noticed, attacking whistleblowers for at least the last 12 years at an ever-increasing rate. It's unconstitutional. It's anti-liberty. It's criminal. And she and I have partnered on bringing greater freedom to other social organizations and inclusiveness in other battles not related to this issue. I mentioned Carolyn being first earlier, and I want to say how great a gift that was to all of us putting this together. Again, somebody had to be first. Senator Gravel, when I called him, said, "Do you mind if I quote you on this and share our private phone call for a bit, Senator, in the world of full disclosure?" He said, "How much money are you offering again?" Damn it, I usually do these things for free, and this is the first time I can't go. My wife and I just made plans to be on a cruise on the Danube at that time, and he changed his vacation plans to
Canceled
be
it.
here.
Canceled his vacation.
Very few people in this room know, but just this past Sunday, Congresswoman Hooley was in the hotel, the Washington Plaza, sobbing because she had just learned her sister had died a couple of days earlier in California. And she'd had the opportunity to say goodbye to her sister, but she was devastated, and she came here anyway. That's a hero to all of us. And then one more and I'll conclude, but I think it's fair to say, as a fairly hardcore libertarian, I've had a seething contempt for most of Congress for most of my life. I'm currently serving as the chair of the National Libertarian Party's Platform Committee and thinking about these issues of how do we save what was once the land of the free and the home of the brave and has become the land of the bailed out and the home of the terrorized by the tyranny of its government. But I've fallen in love with Congress this week. Y'all have been learning about UFOs. I've been learning about the great character of the men and women who actually do serve this nation. And if you're representatives of what's still there, even a portion of it, all hope is not lost. Merrill Cook invited me to come down and brief him. He lives about a half hour from my home in Park City. And when I got there, I discovered that he's the full-time caretaker for the love of his life, Camille. And he has every door of his house locked from the inside out so that she doesn't wander off. She's suffering from Alzheimer's. And his one concern before he agreed to be here was, if I come, would it be possible for my wife to be in the audience where I could see her so that I know she's okay, because I'll never put her in an institution. She's the love of my life. But I need to have her in a seat where I can see her with someone sitting next to her so I can focus on the testimony. And sir, if I could love my wife half as much as I've seen you as an example of love to yours, I'll be okay. You, sir, are a hero as well.
First of all, I would like to thank the panel. You'll be interested to know that I had considerable empathy with you to see all of that information being thrown at you so fast and on a subject which was completely foreign to you. And you did a remarkable job of accepting it, digesting it, and being, in effect, transformed by it. And how I wish that more people would be in that position so that we could really get the word out and get the kind of action that we dream of, but as the Senator says, maybe just a dream, but I hope not, because time is running out. So thank you very much, each and every one of you. You were great, and we appreciate what you have done, and just hope, Mr. Chairman, that you too all redouble your effort when you go out to try and influence people to expose themselves to this kind of information so that they too may understand. And the witnesses, I must say, I agree with everything that's been said about them. I have never seen anything like it in my life. Just absolutely transfixed. Seen more heroes in 5 days than I've seen ever before in my life, except perhaps on VE Day or something. But just wonderful people who are willing to stick their necks out because they're deeply, deeply committed in the search of truth. And that's what we've got to do. I hesitate to mention names because every single one of them should be singled out. But I was particularly thankful this morning to both Richard and Linda that they got us into some of the things that we hadn't been in before. And I will never forget Colonel French admitting that his job was to invent the excuses for the UFOs, and that he designated a lot of them as swamp gas. We all knew that the swamp gas and the plasma and the balloons and all this sort of stuff was you know what, but to have him say so was, but he said something else that I think that is even more memorable to me, and that is never put weapons in space. To adhere to the space treaty. Google the space treaty and listen to Carol Rawson on the reasons why we should have a common access to the space, everybody, and not try to see if we can outwit other people in being the first to spend a lot of money putting weapons in space. And I feel very strongly on that. It's an issue which I've been involved in for a long while and which I will continue to support. And final word is Bob Salas, I also remember, because he summed up the situation in one classic sentence. It's power and greed. It's not national security. And that's what I believe.
Thank you, Paul. And Paul mentioned heroes. Let me introduce one now. Jesse, do you have a few words to say before we leave?
Well, I have a few words. I'll keep these remarks short because everything's already been said, really. But I do want to express my appreciation and honor in presenting my story to this panel that we have. You know, since 1945, 47, I have known that we're not alone in this universe, because based on the material I saw that my dad brought in from the desert, I realized this is not of human manufacture. So if we didn't make it, it means somebody else did. And when you look out at the night sky there in New Mexico, you realize this beautiful place that we live in is called the universe, or our galaxy. As a matter of fact, there's 10 to the 22nd power stars in the known galaxy, which equates the number of grains of sand on the beaches of the Earth. And to say that only one grain of sand out of that multitude has sentient life like us around it is just begging the question there. Because someone once said very truthfully that if we're the only ones here, there's an awful lot of wasted space out there. And so anyway, I started thinking about this. People ask me, how did this affect my religion? My belief in God. Well, I believe in the intelligent design, because if in the very beginning, at the Big Bang, when things were created, if the parameters were changed just ever so slightly, like the rate of expansion of the universe, or the charge on the proton or the electron, or the masses thereof, had that been off by 1 trillion from what it turned out to be, we wouldn't be here, nor would our cousins from outer space be here too. And again, my philosophy, I think we're all related. People of Earth, people of star setup, wherever they come from. We're all related to them, because in the very beginning, when the Big Bang occurred, there's something called quantum entanglement that occurred. And Einstein calls this spooky action at a distance, but that means that all particles created in the Big Bang are related to each other. One example is where they would take two matched particles, send one of them, could be light years away, but you make one change in one, the other one changes correspondingly instantly, like there's faster than light communication. So again, we're all related, we're in this universe, and we have a lot of cousins out there.